Welcome to Showbiz Tell, a monthly podcast from the Georgia Entertainment Public Relations Alliance. And now, here's our podcast.
Welcome to Showbiz Tell, the podcast where public relations professionals deliver a backstage pass to join us as we uncover secrets to success in the entertainment industry. Our special guests will share their favorite show-stopping moments, tried and true business acumen, and telltale adventures from sets, stages, screens, and concert halls. And now it's time to Showbiz Tell. I'm Melissa Sanders.
And I'm Elise Riley.
And with us today is Michelle Caplinger, Senior Executive Director of the Recording Academy Atlanta chapter, a founding member of Georgia Music Partners, and a founding board member of the Georgia Music Accord. Welcome, Michelle.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, ladies.
Our podcast is called Showbiz Tell for a reason. We're leaving up the typical show and tell concept we all grew up with to focus on conversations about how the business of entertainment works. Michelle, we've asked you to bring something interesting to show and tell us about to kick off today's podcast. What do you have with you today?
Okay, so I brought this hat, and it's just not any hat. So back in the mid-'80s, I worked at this nightclub. Isn't it fun?
I love
Let me tell
it.
you, if this hat could talk, I mean, it would be scandalous. But there was a nightclub downtown called Club Rio that I used to work at and book the talent and do the publicity and promotions and all that fun stuff and throw all the big after parties from the concerts and the VIP floor. But the hat, why I find it so fun, it takes me right back to that era because it was literally like the era where there were club kids and everyone sort of had some type of fun drag. It wasn't just going out in a black dress. So I thought, you know what? This is a little bit of fun history for me and a lot of folks in Atlanta during that period of time. And it was also a place where, you know, my career sort of launched because it wasn't just a live music and dance club, and it was a part of Atlanta history. It used to be the old RKO studios. So it was just a fun building to have, you know, a social, you know, spot like that.
That's great.
So cute, right?
Very.
I love it. What's on the back there?
Oh yeah, we have some more of the birds and, you know, I just felt like, you know, I felt like the Grand Dame there. I even have that sort of in my Facebook because, you know, you work full time during the day, right? To book all these really cool hip parties and then book all this great talent. And we were the kind of club that, you know, got those really great acts on their way up. So like the Pixies and Fetchin' Bones and like, you know, bands like that. But
nice.
I would work full-time day and then I would go in every night for all these events that I booked. And I'd sort of have these outfits that made me feel like the Grand Dame and like, you know, like it was my club and you were in my home. So it's a fun time. But truthfully, the launch from that nightclub, a national nightclub promoter here in town, had called me one day. And I had booked this band. Do you all remember the Cowboy Junkies?
Yes.
Time ago. So they wanted to do a show in a club, not just a regular live music venue. And you know, the agent called me and I booked the show. So, you know, after it was advertised, I got this call from someone here who's a very notable concert promoter and artist manager. And he went on to yell at me for 5 minutes on the phone and said, "You don't understand. I get all of their acts, whether the small or the really big acts." And it was so funny because I didn't understand the political landscape of all of this. So all this to say, he said, "I want to come meet with you in person." And I said, "Why? Are you going to yell at me some more?" He came in and he offered me a job.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and that's really the abbreviated story, but it was Charlie Brusco and he was leaving Concert Southern at the time to, we would book Lakewood and we would also book all the venues in Atlanta with all the big artists. And also he managed a few acts. So I kind of look at that period of time, 1986, of going from nightclubs to like a real big girl music job.
Wow.
And he took a great, you know, chance on me. He, you know, there weren't schools, right, back then or college programs for music business. But he knew I knew enough to like work with, CAA and get an act and bring it into the club. And I had been booking these other acts and, doing really well with it. So, he said, look, what you don't know, I'm going to teach you. And he did. And I really credit him for a lot. So that's sort of where I marked the beginning of the real career.
That's amazing. I mean, clearly that role had a big impact on your journey, which you kind of just touched on. I mean, are there other elements of that you feel really kind of gave you that jump start? You talk about that moment and what that meant for you.
Yeah, I mean, it meant a lot. And he and I really were quite night and day in both our musical tastes and our lifestyles. And I, at the time, so I mentioned he managed some bands, big acts. And I remember I had been working with him for about a month and, the entire office is just covered with like, the gold albums and the photos of bands and this, that, and the other. And behind me on one wall were a bunch of framed pictures of like these long haired, like musicians. And one day I said to him, hey, Charlie, who is that? And he goes, are you serious? And I went, yeah. He goes, that's Leonard Skinner in the early days. He managed Leonard Skinner, right? But I was just like, ew, because I was so like, and by the way, I loved working with them. They were like the greatest guys ever. But it's like, I came from like Ministry and, Peter Murphy and the Cult and like, and he said to me, there's a reason why I hired you. He said, okay, you may not be fans or, work in sort of the Southern rock arena or the classic rock, which by the way, I don't ever put myself in a box. But what he said was, everything about those artists. I don't. And he said, this is going to be great because I'm picking your brain, like even early Red Hot Chili Pepper days, like, bands that were really, this is late 80s, early 90s. So it became this beautiful friendship and relationship for work and fun. And he helped me so much. And I think I taught him a lot too.
What an amazing time to be in music. I mean, wow.
I know. And by the way, I have to tell you, I had to eat my words on like artists that I thought I didn't like, and then you get to know them or you go to a live show and you're just like, God, they're like great at what they do, so.
Yeah. Well, tell us how it feels to be a woman in a leading role in the music industry. What advice do you have for other women looking to break into the industry?
Well, thank you for even looking at me as a leading woman in the music industry. I that's a wonderful compliment. I have a lot of advice for these young ladies. I think they need to, obviously do all the things they need to do to perfect, their craft, right? Like, so, what is it? What lane do you want to be in music business? If it's business that you're looking for and not the actual creative side of music, you can't learn enough about it, right? And networking has got to be the biggest, the biggest component to this, because people think the music industry is really, really huge and unpenetratable, if that's a word. But you know what? It's not as big as you think, and we all do chat with one another, right? So I think, obviously the working hard and try not to be anyone but who you are, and also what you do need to take serious, because back in my day, what we encountered a lot was there were plenty of women who wanted to be in the industry, but they just wanted to meet the bands, and it's kind of like, no. You don't have this job because you're going to go party with them afterwards. That's a whole different thing. But there is absolutely zero reason why, any young person, female or male, can achieve any of this with hard work and just keeping, be focused. And I also think it's really valuable to learn what you don't like in this industry, but just make yourself a little bit familiar with it so you're conversant, in any room or any group or any genre, you know what I mean? Like, it's just, so just, I think being your true authentic self is everything. I even think over the 23 years in my current job, most of the interns that we've had, we learned so much from them, just by sort of
Yeah.
sharing their likes and their dislikes and what the landscape is like. And they're not pretending to be anything other than who they are. And that's really refreshing, really refreshing.
That's great.
Yeah. And also don't discredit, if you are like in a music business program, which doesn't mean you have to be, but I think that's great. Don't discredit who's to the right and to the left of you, because they could be a next big producer or a label exec or someone who'll hire you. So always be kind, be someone that people want to work with. Always be an asset, not a liability. The attitude every day when you show up on your job is, what can I do for you? How can I help you? How can I help you? And, I don't think anyone, I don't think anyone would roll their eyes at someone who doesn't come in with the body of experience they might be looking for if they have the willingness to learn and work. And I felt that way and given lots of people shots because they've given, I got that shot.
Yeah.
That's a lot of stuff. Sorry, I was babbling there, but there's,
that's great.
I think it's really great advice you just gave, which would be helpful to people out there wondering, because I think that the music industry is an area that everyone wants to somehow be a part of and isn't always sure how to get there.
Yeah.
Which is a great segue into my next question for you, Michelle.
Okay.
Is what is your secret sauce? How is the business model for the music industry unique? Why do you think that model has helped you be successful in this industry?
I went to college for theater arts. So I'm just going to start there for a second. I'm a song and dance girl, right? Like my aspirations were to be a Broadway baby, but still go hang out at CBGB's, right? Like, and maybe go dancing all night at some dance club. The difference is back when I went to college, I didn't even think about like, a career in music, although again, song and dance girl, loved it all. When I moved from New York City to Atlanta, and I don't want to say there wasn't a lot of musical theater, but there wasn't a lot of musical theater, right?
Right.
And right out of the gate, I had auditioned for an original rock band that I ended up fronting and being in for 4 years. So that was the beginning of me focusing just on music.
Nice.
Now, what's interesting about that is, rock and roll in the early 80s, if that's not theater, I don't know what is, right? So like, I still got to be that performer, and it was like really like great music and a fun time. But the reason why I bring this all up is then I worked in the music business. I almost created some of the jobs myself. In fact, that Club Rio that I referenced earlier, I had them put in full staging in one area of that club that held 1,000 people, state of the art sound and lights. Like it was only a dance club, 2 levels. But the point of it all is like, I always sort of I asserted myself, and, some people thought my ideas were good ones and some laughed at me, and that's okay. They stayed in one lane.
Yeah.
Right. Like,
right.
Even in the early days, like the Bombs Over Baghdad and the rock guitar and it's like that is what they followed no rules.
Yeah.
And worked with so many different people with styles. And I would say to someone coming up, don't be afraid to work with someone or you think you're showing your cards. They get a bit proprietary, and I get that, but it's such a great learning lesson, It's really stimulating for an artist to work with someone that maybe they didn't even think they would meet or go to one of their shows, and they come out with something really interesting. So that's what I would say.
That's great advice.
It's great. It's great advice. And I think, frankly, you could apply that to so many industries people work in.
I do too.
Step outside your box a little bit, right?
I do too. I do too.
And I want to shift gears on that too.
Okay.
You do a lot of advocacy work. I mean, with the Recording Academy, Georgia Music Partners, your new role with the Georgia Accord. Can you tell us a little bit about that and the importance that has to the industry?
Yeah, sure, of course. So, and all of this was new to me as well. And, advocacy can be really intimidating, right? Like legal speak, and really understanding stuff. But I remember that I first really got interested in it. I might have only been in this position for about a year or two, but it was the year that a lot of the music teachers in Georgia were on the chopping block, right? Because of the funding.
And the cuts that happened, right?
Well, that didn't happen the first time because of what we did, honest to God. So I remember like a few people on my board said, I know where the next school board meeting is where they're going to be discussing this, and we can actually attend and get on the docket and talk about why this is not a good idea. And I was like, well, that's really interesting, but we have to back up why, right?
Yeah.
So of course you get all the stats about, a child, learning music and mathematics, how they equate and all the wonderful things that we all know. But I also thought, like, we're going to need some names. We're going to need some muscle in that room for us. So long story short, there was about 22 of us. We only got 2 people on the docket, which was fine. And it was, but we had like the Indigo Girls, Usher, like amazing. We walked it. Yes. And we even had folks with the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra with us to show like, we are this broad, we are this diverse. Let me tell you why this is not a good idea, and that was the first thing we did. And actually that one year they actually didn't cut, so that was great. But the following year they, but that was something that was state, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Then I remember there was some instance with that was a city bill that we went and showed up and put someone forward who could really speak against it. And then because nationally, the Recording Academy, the advocacy work we do, my God, is staggering. Okay. We had the Music Modernization Act approved back in 2018, which is huge. We're still fighting the terrestrial radio, Performance Royalty Act for radio. But like everything we're involved in, it will always be on the side of the creative. And I say that to you because like even in that debate, the radio's on the other side, you know what I mean? And It's not that we don't support radio, but we'll come forward with all these numbers and like, well, yeah, you can do this, but there's many things we're involved in. And with the national stuff, I'll say this much. And it's coming up soon on October 5th, we have what's called District Advocacy Day. And all the 12 chapters, our members are invited to go sit with our Congress people and talk about the current bills that we have, that we're working on and why they're important and why they should support it. And I have to say my national advocacy department does an excellent job of preparing us, like the speaking points, the bullet points. And the funny thing is we've had meetings where there's as little as 5 people. So like someone would take a role like me kind of leading the conversation. And we've had as many as 30 people, sit down with Hank Johnson, and we try to, the bigger groups, we go into like a recording studio or a music centric place. And I always back end it with someone performing because I want them to remember why they're in that room. But the way that we lead that is I'll introduce them to the people that are next to me, or and some are marquee names and some, which I know you both might know, especially you, Melissa, like the producers like the Matt Stills and Tricky Stewart. And this is where I get to brag, and I'll introduce them and say, yes, this is Tricky Stewart. He has won, multi-Grammy winning songwriter producer. Here's Matt Still, Grammy winner producers, worked with Elton John for over 20. And I brag on each of them, and you got their attention. Yep. And then when we talk about the bill and how it affects them personally, because they have this perception that they're all driving in Phantoms, you know, and the Rolls Royces, and they're not, you know?
Yeah, true. If we had a backstage pass to your life, what would we see on your plate right now, and what would be in the pipeline?
Okay, so the pipeline would be, oh gosh, I can't really say, but it will, you know what, I still think that there are so many exciting things in this industry that I can do and will be doing. I want to follow some passion projects. What's on my plate is always amazing Recording Academy work, which, you know, some of the initiatives are the same, but the creatives, you know, there's new people making music every day. And, you know, if you listen and hear what the struggles are and how you can help them, you know, you really feel good about the work you do. I think the backstage pass would be the stuff that I can't talk about in this show that someday I might write a book.
Wonderful.
You absolutely should.
Yeah,
well,
I would read it.
You know, you know, it's so funny. I've had so many friends say to me, "Oh, you really should write a book." And I went, "I can't. I'm a mom." And you know, now my daughter, who's 29, we joke, and she goes, "Oh, you got to write that book, Mom." But you know, here's the thing. I again, you know, I don't take any of this for granted. I have been so blessed and lucky to work in this industry, to be with great people. The people I've been able to meet, whether it's the Recording Academy or even way before the Recording Academy, like you pinch yourself, right? And you go, wow. But you learn they really are no different than you, except probably for, like, you know, their bank accounts and, you know, what they do for a living in front of that many people. But I just feel like, you know, and then you make these incredible friendships, you know, and that's where you really adjust, where I think a lot of younger people are so influenced by the social and they put some of these artists on such a pedestal, and it's like, no, it's okay. You let them down. They're real. And yeah. You know, and they make some mistakes too. So don't aspire to be them, aspire to be you, you know, but.
Right. Yeah, that's great. That's really great. Our final questions we like to call the Blitz, aka a lightning Q&A round.
Okay.
Are you ready for it?
I think so.
Wonderful. So we would love to know what your favorite movie or TV show is.
Oh, I got to say Moonstruck. Sorry. The Italian in me says Moonstruck.
What about your favorite music venue?
So I have two, and neither are open to this day. So CBGB's in New York City would have to be like, talk about an experience. And then in the same vein, the CBGB's of Atlanta, 688. And I played there so often with my bands, so I have special memories. But though that was time and place, man, those were great live music clubs.
I still have the T-shirt for the New York one.
I love it.
What's your favorite hobby?
Dancing.
Oh.
I love to dance.
She's quite the dancer.
Well, when I come back in another life, like, you know, that's what I wanted to do when I was a little girl. I loved it so much. Anyway.
That's
great. What's the last thing you read?
Oh God, don't think less of me. So the 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo.
Oh, that was on our book club list. What did you think?
Oh my God, I loved it. It's an easy read. And you know, that's Taylor Jenkins Reid, Daisy Jones and the Six, the same author. Yeah, I liked it better. I loved it.
That's great. What's your favorite thing about Atlanta, or what makes Atlanta special?
The people. The people. And I do mean that. And I know that sounds trite, but you know, the nice people anyway. The artsy people.
And Michelle, what would people be surprised to know about you?
Okay, so people would probably be surprised to know that I used to stalk Liza Minnelli back in the 70s. My best friend and I, who was a ballerina and Broadway bound, not because of the ballet, but the other dance, she and I'm talking when Liza was the toast of Broadway. Like, you know, this is the good Liza years. She was such an amazing performer that we would go see anything and everything she did. We would wait backstage in the rain and the cold, and then she'd finally let us in at 4 a.m. and we'd party with her. We've slept in front of her hotel room doors waiting for her to come home. Like, why? What were you expecting? But we did become friendly because she knew we weren't going away. My best friend named Rose. Rose and Michelle, those crazy girls from Jersey. That's what we were referred to. But they started taking us to Studio 54 with her. So persistence got us in those doors. And then once again, we'd be like, why are we in this group of very celebrated people? And we're not. It was fun. It was so funny, so funny. You know that Highlights magazine, you circle what doesn't fit in the picture?
Yes.
I used to always say that to her at Studio 54, like, Rose, that's us. We don't, that's Halston. That's Margot Hemingway. You know, there's Liza, there's so-and-so. It's crazy, surreal.
There's probably one other thing people don't know about you, right? About being a singer.
Oh, yes. Okay. So that musical theater background and then being in bands. So I was in several bands here in Atlanta, and the first one was called Lipstick Stains. Original rock music, very dancey, kind of raunchy, like, well, that's not the right word, but kind of pretenders-ish, like, you know, attitude-wise, and so fun. And we toured and did a little EP and had a ball. And then I was in some other music projects, but the last one I was in was a band called Marching Two-Step. I think we're together just under 4 years, and it's what became Collective Soul. So, yeah. And listen, you know, I mean, Ed Roland is one of the most talented songwriters and musicians and front person. We had a ball, but he was a bit shy in those days. And I think he kind of knew me from my bands, and he was like, oh no, put Michelle in. She's a performer. So it's interesting, but I wouldn't trade those days in for anything. But yeah. So people, like, if they just met me through this job a few years ago, like, they wouldn't know all of the 80s and early 90s. I was still on stage shaking, you know, singing, dancing. And,
yeah.
Love
That's
it.
Wonderful.
That's how I've gotten the performance bone. You know, it's like I keep saying I'm a recovering performer, and I don't know if I'll ever recover. I often thought that when the day comes, and I don't know, I don't see it, but when I retire, you know, I'd like to do some theater again. So we'll see.
That's wonderful. Well, that's all the Showbiz and Tell we have for you today.
Oh my gosh, this was so much fun.
I know.
Thank you.
Yes, be sure to subscribe to our podcast at GEPRA.net/podcast and follow us on social media. Special thanks to our wonderful guest, Michele Caplinger, Senior Executive Director of the Recording Academy Atlanta Chapter, a founding member of Georgia Music Partners, and a founding board member of Georgia Music Accord. Michelle, thank you so much for sharing everything today. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. We hope you've been entertained and inspired as much as we have.
Oh, thank you to the two of you. You're doing a great thing. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Michelle. So you've all been listening to Showbiz and Tell, a podcast presented by the Georgia Entertainment Public Relations Alliance. I'm Melissa Sanders.
And I'm Elise Riley.
We'll see you next time.